And what I heard you say in that kind of was the first step of let's write all the options down. Let's actually put them on paper and let's then flesh them out a little bit more. Let's figure out what is good and bad about that. And I know for me, I can get stuck up here in my head and I can just be thinking and going over it and things. But as soon as you start recording them, writing it down makes them tangible and makes them more something you can hold in your hand and allows it to get out of your head. And then as you lay it out, you can actually then apply logic and reasoning to those pieces. And I can think that something is an amazing idea in my head because I haven't fleshed out all the ideas. There was a similar thing, and I think it was Jim Quick talked about, that was the 6 hats, the red hat, blue hat, green hat, red hat, and the looking at that potential outcome by the 6 different perspectives of what would the pessimist say? What would the optimist say? What is the tangible benefits? Where's the money involved in this? Who's the judge on that is another way to, once you've written it down, really seeing it from multiple different perspectives rather than this is the shiny object right now. Let's go do that. That sounds like a great idea.
Mhm.
It's really reacting to your life, living at the whim of the wind, which sometimes has its place. But at least for me, whenever I was only at the whim of the things that were around me is when I got myself in trouble. That's whenever I got blown into the reefs and destroyed my boat rather than actually setting sail to where I wanted to go.
And you spoke about writing it on paper. Writing it on paper, it's so important because every time you write it on paper, let's say it like that. If you can't trust in your memory, first that our memory is it fails us very much. But if you trust in your memory, every time you go back to an idea, to a project, you would need to rebuild that in your mind, have this effort. This alone is a lot of energy that is being wasted because you already done this job. And when you have a clear plan, like even if you have a paper where you scratch something, make some sketches, but then you communicate it clearly, like you put into some sort of container, like a notebook or something, or on Notion online, summarize version, like what is important, you architecture the information, things like that, make it clear for what is that idea that you are communicating, even to yourself. This makes a lot difference because every time you go back to this project now, first, your mind already has that idea of structure. And second, you work on top of what you did. You build on it. Every time you go back, instead of reviewing it and just having this conversation with your mind, you see much more productive because you will build on it every time, build on it. Every time you revisit the conversation, you add something, add value to it.
Absolutely. It's definitely good to get the structure that works for you around this too. There's note-taking skills that they don't necessarily teach in school. So take the notes down, yes, but then use something. You talked about a couple of different tools. So one was the mind map, which is a skill in and of itself of putting in a concept and then actually connecting it to all the other possible concepts that are related to it. The pros, the cons, the upside, the downside, the investment, the return, all those other components. I think that's a great tool that we should also discuss a little bit later on how we can actually clarify this vision for our life. Because as you said, as we put down the basics, we can then flesh out of it and then expand on that. I think that's an amazing idea. And I think that each of these other concepts that we'll be talking about is just other ways to expand on that skill, to build on top of getting it on paper. So we can think, it's the idea of, I've heard people say, I'm going to think out loud right now. It's a way to think out loud on paper, to think out loud in Notion, on Evernote, or whatever tool you're using to get this out of your brain and onto paper so that your brain can be then allowed to go to what's next or the other perspective or shift from a different level that you need to look at it as.